the very fact that the European Union, which is now also striving for becoming a geopolitical actor, the European Union as a collective state very openly, but it wants to learn the language of power, and if it wants to learn the language of power, it needs to also deal with the major great powers. And in this sense, of course, it has a significant geoeconomic clout that it can use. So this is something that can be helpful to India. However, we also have to understand that, and we have to accept our agenda of alliances and Europe when it comes to the approach to Russia. Now, in our case, in the European case, we also have a different approach to China. That would mean one that is not being shared by India. The very fact that we have deepened relations with China significantly in the geoeconomic domain and have helped China become this significant second system pole, this is something that India certainly does not share. So in a sense, we have to also develop an understanding while deepening the relationship, the institutional one, and here I argue that we really need FTA, free trade agreement, that needs to be signed as quickly as possible, adopted as quickly as possible. We cannot lose another 10 years in negotiations. This is something that both will benefit from, but at the very same time, we also have to develop an understanding for each other's different geopolitical interests.
Thank you. Let me, before I turn to the external affairs, Minister Jeff, very quickly, how are the two countries looking at the future? Where are the points of disagreement and friction, and your assessment of the opportunities over the next few years? And then I'll turn to the External Affairs Minister. Jeff.
First of all, I think we've done a much better job in recent years navigating differences, and I think the Ukraine issue has been a prominent example of that. Something that in the past may have caused legitimate disdain. It doesn't take sides, it takes its own side. And that's okay. That's what the Indian government that's what the Indian people elected the government to do, is to take side. Often is in India's interests to cooperate on issues, not tell them and lecture them why it's in their interest, but demonstrate why we have common interests and pursue ways to operationalize those interests. I think we've come a long way in that regard.
Mr. Minister, let me kind of frame it. Maybe you can tell us, as you travel through the various countries that you visit, without names will be fine.
Thank you. I would give you a more analytical and probably more detached answer than you are expecting. So look, when we are looking at India at 75, it's not just India at 75, we are also looking at another 25 years ahead. You know, what have we done? Where have we fallen short? What do we want to do? Because those are often the conversations we have when we go out. If I were to pick a single thing we've done, a difference we've made to the world in the last 75 years, it is the fact that we are a democracy. If today there's a sense in the world that, for all the ups and downs of history, what's happening in different geographies, but somehow in all of us there is that gut sense that democracy is in some form the future. A large part of it is due to the choices that India made and choices that India stuck with in very difficult situations. And there was a time when in this part of the world we were pretty much the only democracy. So if democracy is global today, or we see it as global today, I think in some measure that credit is due to India. Now, it's also fair when we look back at 75 years, we should reflect on where we have come up short. And I would say the 2-3 areas which are quite obvious. One, clearly we didn't pay the kind of attention to our social indicators, our human resources, as we should have. 2, we didn't concentrate as much on manufacturing and technology strengths as we should have. And 3, in terms of foreign policy, probably in the mix of various elements, we didn't give as much importance, as much weight to hard security as we should have. And I say this because, this is not a polemical criticism of the past. Other countries who were in similar situations did exactly this, and which is one of the reasons why some of them are today ahead. It is something we are trying to do now. I mean, these are exactly the areas we are trying to correct at this point of time. So it's not that it can't be done. It is being done even as we speak. So what is it I think we should be doing in the future? One, I would say most of all, to me, the next 25 years is about capability, capability, and capability in every possible domain, in every possible way. We should be completely fixated on outcomes. We should be utterly practical about how we leverage the international environment. So a lot of the conversations which we have when we go abroad is about capability building. The second is, and that goes back to some remarks you made about how we are perceived. Look, we have to be confident about who we are. I think it's better to engage the world on the basis of who we are rather than try and please the world as a pale limitation of what they are. This idea that others define us, that somewhere there we need to get approval of other quarters, I think that's an era we need to put behind us. And definitely I would hope in the next 25 years we will be even more deeply international in terms of our commitments, in terms of our responsibilities, in terms of our role than we are. And since you are asking me, so all these conversations, say something which is of interest. I must say my morning was made today by meeting a fellow foreign minister who told me that Gujarat is ahead of globalization. Actually, he said Gujarat doesn't need globalization. They're already out there. I think in a way, I would hope in the next 25 years, India too is actually at the forefront of a kind of a right kind of globalization, more decentralized, more fair, more, one which works for everybody, and one which is not leveraged, which is not weaponized.
So let me ask you, let's flip this question. What do we expect from the world? We have some key partners, we are diving into certain key relationships, whether it's the EU, whether it's the US, whether it's our big investments into political and economic investments into Africa. What are we seeking from the world as we move to the capacity stage of our next 25 years?
Well, I think I would look at it, I think I'll tell you what we should not be doing. We shouldn't be looking at the world with a sense of entitlement. We need to earn our place in the world, and which to a certain extent would therefore come to the issue of how does the world benefit by the growth of India. We need to demonstrate that. I think today, when there's a lot of talk about reliable, resilient supply chains, when people speak about transparency and trusted technologies, if India could do more and show the rest of the world that the world benefits by India being bigger, so we need to develop stakes in our future where the rest of the world is concerned. I think some of that is happening. Some of that is happening for strategic reasons, obviously, but we need to make more of it happen, especially for economic reasons.
Prime Minister Harper, would you like to come in on something that the Minister said? Would you have a comment?
There's one comment I think really needs to be made, and that is to reflect, because the Minister rightly reflected on some things India can do better in the future. But I think we should take a moment at 75 to reflect on what a relative success India actually is. Now, if you look at all of the countries that emerged from colonialism in the post-war period, and you focused on their various vulnerabilities, strengths and weaknesses, you would look at India and you would say, look at this country of just enormous cleavages, regional, religious, linguistic, social, cultural, and with enormous social and economic challenges. And here we are 75 years later, and of all the countries that have emerged from that past, there are very few that have demonstrated the unity, the high levels of governance, the advancement of human rights and democracy, the economic advancement, the eradication of hunger. So, look, I think that we obviously need to reflect on what India can do better or different. But it is a remarkable success story, and compared to other countries that objectively should have been way ahead of India, India is ahead of just about all of them.
So we are going to open it up to all of you. I would request you to walk to the mic and pose your question. My young fellows, especially the Raisina young fellows, the officer trainees. I would want to see some young voices come into this conversation as well. But till they come to the mic, why don't you go ahead? We'll take a bunch of questions. Okay, do introduce yourself and short questions, no commentaries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hai Quen from Tel Aviv University, Israel. My question is to Minister of Foreign Affairs of India. You spoke about self-confidence. It is a rising power. So my question is to you is regarding what are your plans for turning India? Thank you.
There are two questions on that end. Please go ahead, the young fellows.
Thanks, Samir. My question is also to...
What's your name? Introduce yourself.
My name is Mohammed. I am from Egypt, and I am with the Raisina Young Fellows. So my question is to His Excellency, the Minister of India, Mr. Jaishankar. You mentioned yesterday the efforts of India to increase food supply and increase the production of wheat. So could you please elaborate on that?
And the next question, please. Esther.
Thank you, Samir. My name is Esther. I'm from Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. My question is to Your Excellency Minister Jaishankar. Be clear on its stance on Ukraine, and I quote, "An India that equivocated on Ukraine cannot blame others for responding with the same indifference if China decided to teach it a lesson and we do the
Shashi is sitting right here.
Yes. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about this? Because Indonesia is in a way in the same stance in India. We don't want to choose sides, but at the same time, we have this big question of neutrality and many others. Thank you so much.
And final question here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, the one in front, sir, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is Ali Miftahi.
I'll come to you. Let's take the...
Ali Miftahi, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Tunisia. My question is to Dr. Jaishankar. It's quite simple. You are saying that 75 years of independence of India is about what have been achieved so far. My question is, and what you are looking to do for the next 25 years. how do you see the Indo-Pacific region and the world for the...
When India was independent, it has created a democratic movement in all other Southeastern countries. What you were looking for during the more 25 years as democratic institutions, and what India has looking to bilateral relations and multilateral relations with other Southeastern countries. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take you. Go ahead. Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Patrick Kugiel, I'm from the Polish Institute of International Affairs in Warsaw, Poland. I have a question to His Excellency Minister Jaishankar. In your book, The India Way, you wrote that India must be more ready and willing to take a risk in international affairs, and that India will be more decider, shaper, rather than abstainer. But yet, for the last 2 months, India abstained at least 11 times at the different forums at the UN on different resolutions concerning Russian aggression against Ukraine. So my question is, wasn't that a good moment actually to take a risk and to have a more principled position, not to abstain, but to
Question
say...
is, what is the question?
I got the question.
You got the question. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So risk-taking and the abstention, I think that's the question. And your book, by the way, is featured in most of the questions. The India Way. So I'll start with you, and then I'll go down.
Yes, I think people shouldn't just pick on me. Let's sort of broaden it out. But look, let me give very quick replies because I know the clock is ticking. It's, on the Security Council, we have our plan. The problem is we need to have other people to have a plan which is similar to our plan.
Correct.
On the wheat, I answered it yesterday, which was, we have a significant wheat production. We would obviously like to go into the global markets and try to compensate for the shortfalls as much as we can. In fact, we are talking at a high speed, which was too fast for me. I'm not sure I would, and it goes to what our views are, but also explain that in our minds, the best way forward is to focus, and we think our choices, our positions are best placed to advance that. The question which I had about, where are you going to go 25 years from now? I think more or less I answered that, obviously to the Indo-Pacific as well. And the question which the person from Nepal asked on South Asia, that in a sense, 75 years, there's more democracy in South Asia than there was 75 years ago. Where will we be 25 years from now? I would say probably the shortest, most truthful answer to that would be, we would be a promoter of democracy in South Asia. We would now like to be South Asia grows along with us.
Final words from the rest of the panelists. You want to come in on anything that you heard? You have some thoughts on his responses or what you heard as questions? Jeff, would you like to come in? Short answers.
I don't think I understood a single question that was asked from the audience. It was very garbled. But no, this credit for putting together another fantastic international conference in a challenging environment, frankly. It's been a great honor to share the panel with these.
Well, I think that one of the things that is comforting from a European perspective is that to hear here in India that the next few decades are not necessarily reduced to a story of bipolarity between the US and China. There's a lot more happening out there, and India has a very major role to play, which we welcome. We welcome greatly, and we believe that linkages between Europe and India can be a strong part of that. So I'm very pleased coming back to Delhi.
Samir, you diplomatically pointed out earlier that we in the West have a tendency to tell other people what they should do. I think in this case, I'll say that the Indian foreign minister's answers are probably the best answers on Indian foreign policy. So I'll let them stand.
And Velina, final words to you.
Both Europe and India do not want to see an emergence of a second Cold War. They do not want to see a bifurcation of the global system. And we have a story to tell together. And that means, of course, a story that is different, that does not necessarily means alliances in this Cold War understanding. Which is why if there is one development, geopolitical development that we can deliver on that as well. So there is a lack of understanding about the great potential of India in the West, not only in Europe, but also to some extent in the United States. I think that India more when facing the rise of China and the imperiled global order, how to repair this imperiled order, then India needs, in fact, the West when facing China in South Asia. So in fact, in this particular case, we have to also develop an understanding for national interests, for geopolitical choices, and we have to find these avenues for cooperation instead of actually aggravating each other because of some other choices that we do not share.
Mr. Minister, final words.
I really think the India-EU partnership needs more attention, needs more work, needs more commitment, and needs to get a higher profile.
Great. So please join me in applauding this wonderful discussion and the wonderful panelists. And remain seated. We will have India's Environment Minister joining us to speak about India's green transitions. And again, thank you very much, sirs, for coming to Delhi and for joining us at the Raisina Dialogue.
Thank you.